with another Heart of the Huntress episode. Last week, we saw Margaret hunt her first management animal in Australia.
So Margaret, we've completed our journey from my hometown. We've travelled up through southeast Queensland and we're now actually going to head north.
The girls were now to prepare for their big road trip to Cape York. They would travel through many towns, some large, most small. Margaret would be treated to some very impressive views and winding roads as they drove through the towns of Yarraman, Blackbutt, Mundubra and Monto in the Burnett region, all of which had names that Margaret could not pronounce, but was funny when she tried. They would head north from their red deer hunting spot along the Great Dividing Range, which is a mountain range that separates the coastal section of eastern Australia from the flat farming country to the west. From there, the roads became straight, dusty and boring, and the towns they passed through, well, you would miss them if you blinked for too long.
We started the true outback section of our Australian tour, heading west from the coast to Cape York, Queensland. Christie, tell us more about our journey from now on.
Sure, so from here we have a few 100 kilometres of dirt road, long, straight, flat and very bumpy roads, and it will take us through country that many would call featureless and inhospitable. But for others like myself, it's a place symbolising freedom, beauty and a place to call home. So the roads will take us through huge cattle stations, some as big as small European countries.
Wow, that's quite big.
That's right. So in fact, Australia is actually home to the largest cattle station in the world, and it's actually as large as the European country of Belgium.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's really big. Now tell me, Christie, why is the property so big?
Well, Margaret, as you'll see as we continue to head west on our journey, the country is quite harsh and we have long periods of dry. So you'll find that for the cattle farmers, they actually need to have a lot more land or a lot more acres per head of cattle in order to keep those cattle alive, because the nutrients just aren't in there in the soil and in the grass that they're eating.
It's very interesting. But let's hit the road, Jack.
Let's do it.
Christie announced that they were at the start of the driveway to the property. The driveway was dusty and long. Oh, so long. 70 kilometres long, in fact. It was the longest driveway Margaret had ever been on, but also the prettiest. Due to the vast distance from anywhere, large outback stations have their own plane runway, where the weekly mail plane will arrive to deliver mail, parcels and other essentials such as medications to the stations. The plane arrives at a very specific time, allowing for the station managers to arrange for the runway to be cleared of vehicles and animals. The manager will then drive over to meet the crew and collect their goods. Sometimes the plane will also carry passengers, allowing for station workers to get in and out of major townships quickly. During the wet season, when roads are closed for many days or weeks, the mail plane can be the lifeline for outback residents. Having travelled such a distance, Margaret and Christie were in great need of a rest. However, there was hunting to be done.
So we're about to head out on our pig hunt up here in Cape York. So Margaret, as the hunter, tell us how you're going to approach this hunt.
Well, due to the hot conditions, the opportunity to catch pigs grazing in the open is really limited. Our best bet is to hunt the creekline and water sources that provide coolness and good cover for the pigs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Although particularly in the early mornings and the very late afternoons, we can find the odd lonely boar traversing the grasslands, which can make for an interesting hunt. So if wounded, the Cape York boar is actually very famous for getting cranky and hiding in the long grass. And many hunters have been at the ugly end of a charge by a wounded boar. And if you can see around us, the trees aren't real good for climbing. So these termite mounds behind us, they're scattered all through this area, so they often can provide a bit of safety and a way to save our butts. So we'll keep these close by. But yeah, otherwise, let's head to it.
Yeah, I will keep this cover in mind today. Thanks, Christy.
All right.
The large cattle stations will always have several dams or man-made waterholes to keep the cattle hydrated.
We are about to start our afternoon hunt. And for this afternoon, we're going to start walking next to the creek, and hopefully we can find a pig or two. So Christy, what can we expect?
Well, expect the unexpected. But essentially, it's still quite warm, so we can still feel it. Although we're getting a nice cool breeze at the moment, the pigs are still likely to be seeking shade or cool water. So by walking along the creek line, we can actually cover both bases. So we're hoping to follow this creek line down. The wind is perfect for us, and hopefully come across some pigs just resting up or starting to move about in as the afternoon gets on, to seek a little bit of food and a bit of water and some relief from the heat. Yeah, so we'll see what we come across.
Well, so let's do this.
Okay.
They parked the car at the start of a creek that has a large lagoon with lots of pig activity. There were many wallows, some fresh and some not so fresh. At this time of the year, it was best to follow creek lines. At this time, the creeks were not running. However, some of the creeks were scattered with water holes that had not yet dried up, and it's close to these holes that the pigs like to take shelter, usually under large piles of timber that have been washed into woody mounds from the floods in the wet season. It was a good creek. There were water holes scattered along the entire length of it. However, Margaret and Christie were soon disappointed with its productivity. It was still early in the afternoon, so the pigs would not likely to be out feeding, but they were hoping to catch one out having a drink or wallowing. The next likely scenario is to see one sleeping under some cover. However, for very dark, cumbersome creatures, they blend in very well with the environment. They burrow themselves into the sand under the cover of fallen branches or logs, and it is so easy to walk right past them without either party knowing of the other's presence. The girls were getting weary from long, unproductive walks, and were almost considering turning back. They turned a bend in the creek and came across a very large pile of washed up branches. The girls' intuition kicked in. They could feel that this was a good spot. So Margaret crept quietly up towards the shaded side of the timber. And sure enough, there were two pigs sleeping soundly in the sand. They were at close range. so Margaret put the rifle up for a shoulder shot. Success. Margaret's first Cape pig. It was a big sow.
Well done, Margaret.
Thank you.
Fantastic shooting. That all just happened so quickly, didn't it?
Very quickly.
So it feels like we've been walking for so long and just see nothing. And I think we were starting to get a little bit disheartened, thinking,
Where's the pigs?
yeah, where are the pigs? Are there any pigs in Australia? And then finally, there she was.
Yeah, it happened, like you said, very quickly. We were walking next to the creek, and like I said before, it's this time of the day the pigs are bedding underneath the trees and in the thick bushes. So, and while I was walking, and there was a big bush, and something just told me there might be something in that bush, and so I started just to make ready just for in case. And when I just walk past the bush, the one tree, and I spot something black, and I know that's one. And then I just make double sure with the two. So I immediately act and make use of my only opportunity, and it paid off.
Yeah. So there's been very few opportunities. I guess it's a lot different to Africa, where you have a lot more species, and although the species that we hunt here in Australia, they're a lot more forgiving, you can generally afford to make that little mistake and it might not cost you the whole hunt. However, those species coming along, it's very few and far between, so we work very hard for the animals, so we don't want to bust that chance. So you did very well and took that opportunity.
Yeah. No, I agree. You only got that one opportunity, and you can't afford to mess up. So everything worked out perfectly for me, and I'm very, very happy. Everything went very well. So, and my first pick.
Yeah.
In Australia.
Australian pig.
My one and only Australian pig.
Maybe not only. One so far, but well done.
Thank
awesome.
you so much.
Great hunting with you.
Thank you, and it was an honor hunting with you.
So, thanks, old girl.
Part of the Huntress aim to demonstrate to all people the power of drive, ambition and unity. We aspire to be positive role models for all women, men and children, to be valued for our skills, knowledge, ability to share, learn and succeed, and encourage others to succeed. It was late afternoon, and Christie and Margaret were returning from an afternoon hunt along a creek line. Christie applied the brakes, a little too heavily, and the Land Cruiser ute and the girls were suddenly engulfed in a thick cloud of bull dust. Christie saw a boar walking in the lightly timbered country. Somewhere in the dust was the boar, but after getting out of the ute with the rifle, the dust was still too thick for Margaret to see it through the scope. When the dust finally settled, the girls were surprised to see the boar still ambling along away from us. He was not spooked by the cloud of dust. He seemed to be quite content to continue on his way to his destination. Leading the girls on a game of cat and mouse as he kept just out of shooting range, almost as if he were aware of their presence but didn't care. He would occasionally stop and turn broadside for a few moments, but always when he was just out of range. The cover was quite thin, but with the pig usually facing away from them and presenting only his rear end, the girls were able to keep him in sight and walk very quickly to keep him at a respectable distance. He finally stopped broadside for a perfect shot. However, as bad luck would have it, it was while the girls were walking through an open patch, with no trees to take a lean on, and the distance still too far for a freestanding shot. The light was beginning to get poor, and the girls feared that he would soon walk into thicker bush as he approached the creek line and be lost forever. Margaret wasted no time in using this opportunity to close the gap, and by the time he appeared broadside from the left side of the ant mound, Margaret had set herself up ready to take the shot. This was a young boar, but had a very large body size for a Cape York pig, as they normally show evidence of the poor conditions by having very small bodies.
Well, she's the queen of putting the pressure on herself and shooting these great specimens in the dying hours at the last minute. And here she's done it again with your first Cape boar. So first Australian boar. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Well
Christie.
done. So we actually we spotted this fella coming into the salt lick for a bit of an afternoon feed and stopped the vehicle, and then we had to find him again through a cloud of bull dust. But it was by no means a window shoot. The stalk that ensued was just absolutely awesome. So tell us about the stalk, Margaret.
Well, like you said, everything will happen very, very quickly. We spotted the pig crossing the road, and we immediately pull up the brakes, and we are out, and it was a cloud of dust, and we couldn't see the pig anywhere, so we have to wait until the dust settled down, and then I spotted the pig, and then the stalk started, and I just kept on his tail, but I just couldn't take a shot. The only thing I could see all the time was his backside, and he don't want to just stop and turn broadside for me at one time, at no point. So I just follow him the whole time, and I kept on stalking him until the last minute before the sun disappeared. He stopped, and I've got only that one chance, and I just took it.
Yeah, it's almost like he was being cheeky and he knew exactly where you were the whole time, almost arrogant really, just keeping that little bit out of range, and as soon as you were ready to shoot, off he went again. So yeah, it was a great end to another fantastic day up here in the Cape, and another one down. So yeah, another great hunt shared.
Thank you, big boy. Thanks.
Join us for the next action-packed adventure, where Christie attempts to take down a Cape York boar with her compound bow. See ya!